The Lord often thwarts, frustrates, and foils the plans of Israel's enemies. If you read through the Old Testament, there's lots of different examples of that. The reading from 2 Kings chapter 6 is an example from this morning that we read, how the enemy, the king of Aram, was just livid that somehow the king of Israel was finding about their ambush plans. And he learns that Elisha was informing the king of Israel about their plans and how that was thwarted and foiled. Nehemiah chapter 4 is another example. If you're familiar with that account, at that point in Nehemiah, they had built the wall all the way around Jerusalem, halfway to its height. And the people had given themselves to this work, but the people around them did not like that. So Sanballat and Tobiah, the people of Ashdod, the Arabs, all of these people did not like that, and they plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and stir up trouble. In fact, here's what they said. Before they know it or see us, we will be right there among them and will kill them and put an end to the work. That would be a little bit discouraging, wouldn't it? You're working on this wall and you hear that somebody wants to kill you, but the Lord made known that plan to Nehemiah and the people, so they prepared for it. Here's what Nehemiah did. Therefore, he stationed some of the people behind the lowest parts of the wall and at the exposed places, posting them by families with swords and spears and bows. And after he looked things over, he stands up and says to the nobles and officials and the rest of the people, "Don't be afraid of them. Remember the Lord who is great and awesome, and fight for your families." And when the enemy learned that their plans had been found out and frustrated, they couldn't attack the people, and the people went back to the work that they were doing, and they completed the work that they were doing. They finished the wall. The enemy's plans were frustrated. Well, in our passage this morning, there's another example in the New Testament of the Lord doing this. And on this occasion, it's on behalf of the Apostle Paul. The Jews in Acts chapter 23, and there are 40 of them, 40 plus men, plot against Paul to kill him. Over 40 people have plotted to kill Paul. Some suggest that this group may be some of the Jews from the province of Asia who had tried to beat Paul to death, and now they just want to finish the job. Some suggest that it's some of the other Jews later who had said and screamed, "Rid the earth of him, he doesn't deserve to live." And that's the intent they want to carry out. Whether or not it's either of those groups or a combination, we don't know, but they certainly want to kill Paul. They want to put an end to his work. And they even get the cooperation of the Sanhedrin that we've been talking about. This group of Pharisees and Sadducees, the Jewish religious council, they go to them for help in this plot to kill Paul. And that's where we pick up this account in chapter 23 of Acts, verses 12 through 15. This is the word of the Lord. The next morning, the Jews formed a conspiracy and bound themselves with an oath not to eat or drink until they killed Paul. More than 40 men were involved in this plot. They went to the chief priests and the elders and said, "We have taken a solemn oath not to eat anything until we've killed Paul. Now then, you and the Sanhedrin petition the commander to bring him before you on the pretext of wanting more accurate information about this case. We're ready to kill him before he gets there." The word of the Lord. If you remember from a couple weeks ago, just before this in Acts 23, verses 1 through 11, there was such a argument and dissension between the Sadducees and the Pharisees that the commander feared that Paul would be torn into pieces. And so he rescued him from them and put him in the barracks. And verse 12 picks up on what happens that next morning. By the next day, 40 plus men have already conspired and plotted to kill Paul. Didn't take very long, did it? Overnight, they hatched this plan to kill Paul. They made this murder pact, the message puts it, except that that's not how they saw it. They didn't see it as a murder. They thought that they were being zealous for God. They thought that they were carrying out justice on behalf of God. That's how they saw it. They were going to do this for God. And Jesus said this would happen. In John 16:2, Jesus says, they will put you out of the synagogue. In fact, the time is coming when anyone who kills you will think they're offering service to God. That's what these zealots think. They will do such things because they neither know the Father or me. And there are many things like that that are done for God or in God's name, but really have nothing to do with God. This is an example. These zealots try to use God to authorize God for their murderous vendetta, but really they're just taking the Lord's name in vain. That's what it means. But they don't care. They don't care. In fact, their rage has only intensified over these course of days. And even if it isn't the group who's raised their voices and shouted, rid the earth of him, he's not fit to live, that's certainly what's in their hearts. They don't want Paul to draw breath any longer. They've plotted to kill him. I want you to notice how their zeal is further illustrated by this oath that they take. Did you hear what they said? We've taken a solemn oath not to eat anything until we have killed Paul. And the verse right before that says, or drink anything. David Gusick says, they're so zealous that they made a vow not to eat or drink until Paul was dead. That's their level of commitment or stupidity, one or the other. They must think that they're going to be able to carry out this vendetta pretty quickly. Because you can't live without water very long, can you? I can't live without water for just a sermon time. I've got to take a few drinks during my sermon, right? But that's what they're bent on. That's their zealous rage in their hearts, that they're ready to kill Paul, and they're going to do it. Notice how their zeal is illustrated further. The word oath is a strong one. In fact, one word study says it means to bind themselves under a great curse, to declare oneself liable to the severest divine penalties if they don't carry out their oath. And notice, they make this oath before they had even talked to the religious leaders in the Sanhedrin. They had already committed to this oath, and they didn't know if the Sanhedrin was going to say yes or not. They probably thought they would just go along with it. Or maybe it's that they're just so zealous they're going to carry out this plot whether or not they get help or not. But they ask for help in this conspiracy. These zealots suggest to the Sanhedrin and the high priests and the chief priests and the elders that they don't need to be involved in this, except if you would help by just calling Paul in on the pretext that you're getting some more information about his case. We'll do the rest from there. We'll kill him before he even gets to you. It's almost like, don't worry yourself. You're not going to be involved in that, except that they are. Except that they would be. Because they knew what they were doing, right? They knew that this was just a pretext for evil to kill Paul, and they know that Paul has not been found guilty either. So they can't stand clear of this involvement. The message picks up on this, even though they couldn't get out of it. Here's what that's what the intention was. We're bound ourselves by a solemn oath, they tell them, to eat nothing until we kill Paul. But we need your help. Send a request from the council to the captain to bring Paul back so that you can investigate the charges in more detail. We'll do the rest. Before he gets anywhere near you, we'll have killed him. You won't be involved. You remember, as we've gone along here, this is exactly why Paul's friends didn't want him to go to Jerusalem. Remember the elders from Ephesus, the believers in Tyre, they didn't want Paul to go to Jerusalem for this very reason. But Paul had shared with them that he had counted the cost. He said, I'm willing to be arrested and even die for the name of the Lord Jesus in Jerusalem. And he's already been arrested. And now there's this conspiracy that his death is a pretty good possibility here. a very real possibility with this plot against him. But Paul doesn't know about that yet, the plot. He doesn't know about that. He's in jail, but he doesn't know about the plot to kill him yet. And thinking about this, I recalled to my mind one of the verses of Amazing Grace that we sang this morning. Verse 3 or verse 4. Did you hear these words? Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. 'Tis grace has brought me safe thus far. I recalled those words from that song, and we may not have enemies plotting to kill us, but couldn't you testify this morning that the Lord has brought you through all kinds of situations, all kinds of trouble, all kinds of hardship, all kinds of dangers, toils, and snares, some of which you didn't know about at the time, only later you saw what God had done to intervene on your behalf. And couldn't you testify this morning that God in his providence and his goodness has been watching over you? And perhaps there's even things that he's protected you from that you don't even know about yet, that you still don't know about. I thought of two personal examples. And the question I want you to be thinking about as I share these examples is, how has God's grace brought you safe thus far? In his goodness and providence, how has he brought you through? One example dropped in my brain. It was just like out of nowhere. Zoop, right there. An example on Wednesday. I thought about something that happened with my beautiful wife, Beth, and I. We'll be married 22 years, June 26th. And we went to Denver/Colorado Springs, Colorado for our honeymoon. And we drove my Chevy Malibu, may it rest in peace, or pieces. At that time, it only had like 30,000 miles on it, so we thought it would be a reliable vehicle to get there. And the drive to Denver is over 600 miles. It took 10, 11 hours, whatever it was. And we drove everywhere. We drove all the way to Colorado Springs. We drove up Pikes Peak we didn't go up the train. We drove up Pikes Peak to the visitor center, and then my beautiful wife, Beth, drove back down. She didn't like that. You did both? I thought it was just up. It was both? Okay. So she can correct me here. She did both, drove up and down, and it wasn't that safe of a situation because there was snow up there too and ice on the road, especially the higher you got. So we drove all the way up and down there. We drove to the Garden of the Gods in that area as well. We drove all the way back to Kansas City. And when we got back, we found out that there was a missing caliper bolt, a bolt from the caliper missing. It was gone. We did not know about it. Now, Ted, correct me if I've got this wrong, but the calipers are what house the brakes, right? The brake pads. Is that correct?
It's what stops the car.
Stops the car. So that's a pretty important piece to have in your brake system, the caliper bolt. You don't want to be traveling 1,300 miles plus there and back to Colorado with your brakes maybe not being able to function at some point. Did I tell you about the mountain? All the way up this steep, winding mountain road and back down, and we had a missing caliper bolt. It was God's protection, obviously. I don't even know why we had you look at the car, if it was for that or something else, but you said, hey, you probably shouldn't have been driving that car to Colorado and back. It's an example of God's protection, and we didn't even know about it till later. Didn't even know about the missing caliper bolt. Here's a second example. On February 16, 2012, I was playing basketball with Patrick. He was a 15-year-old kid in the neighborhood on the parsonage driveway, and I was not as mobile or quick even then, as it's worse now, but even then I wasn't as quick or agile as I used to be playing basketball, and I couldn't get out of the way of his inadvertent elbow to my throat. And there was this cracking noise, and there was this something happened noise kind of thing, and I couldn't breathe, I couldn't talk, and so I went to the doctor. Just for the moment I couldn't talk. I could talk after that, but when it happened I couldn't. And I went to the doctor, and he took an x-ray, and they couldn't find anything. But they referred me to an ears, nose, and throat specialist to check things out. And thankfully, I went, because sometimes I don't go back to the doctor when they refer me. Anyone else? Anyway, I went this time to the ENT, and he took a CAT scan and to see if there was a fracture there or not. And he said, don't talk above a conversational tone. Don't sing, and don't play any contact sports. He couldn't find anything fracture-wise, but he suggested, let's do an MRI as well. When they took the MRI, they found that there was a tumor in my neck that was not related to the elbow to my throat. It had been there. So on June 20th, 2012, the tumor and a salivary gland, that's why I need to keep drinking water. I'm missing one in here, see? I've got an excuse. The tumor and a salivary gland was removed from my neck, and a post-surgery biopsy of the tumor revealed that it was a carcinoma expliomorphic, what's the word, Bethy? Adenoma. I never can remember that part. Adenoma. It was a tumor in my neck that was cancerous. I had no idea what that was, but it's a rare aggressive form of salivary gland cancer that arises from a pre-existing benign pleomorphic adenoma. It typically presents as a long-standing lump that suddenly begins to grow rapidly, so you can see it. But in my case, you couldn't see it. It was too down deep in there. In fact, it took 4 hours to get the tumor out, and the ENT said he had never seen a tumor in that place before, and he wrote a medical review paper about it. But it would never have been found until it was too late, except for that elbow to the neck. It would have been found too late before that thing opened up and poured cancer into my body. But in his great mercies and undeserved providence, not because I'm a pastor, not because I'm better than anybody else, as Pastor Wayne was talking about, I'm just an ordinary person, but it's because of God's mercy and grace that the tumor was found, and the ENT said was probably there since I was born, but was taken out before it turned deadly. In his providence and goodness, God extended his love through his watchful care and brought me through. Haven't you been brought through by his grace? If you don't think so, you're here this morning, aren't you? You're here this morning, aren't you? It doesn't mean that bad things and suffering won't happen. It means that in his providence and goodness, he extends his love to us in his watchful care, and he brings us through with the strength and help that we need. From these two brief accounts, and you could probably add your own testimonies, couldn't you? You could probably add to that your own dangers, toils, and snares that he's brought you through. But from those examples, you can probably anticipate that God is going to deliver Paul in this instance, and you would be right. And it's wonderful how it happens. Look at verse 16. But when the son of Paul's sister heard of this plot, he went into the barracks and told Paul. Then Paul called one of the centurions and said, "Take this young man to the commander. He has something to tell him." So he took him to the commander. The centurion said, "Paul, the prisoner, sent me sent for me and asked me to bring this young man to you because he has something to tell you." The commander took the young man by the hand, drew him aside, and asked, What is it that you want to tell me?" He said, "The Jews have agreed to ask you to bring Paul before the Sanhedrin tomorrow on the pretext of wanting more accurate information about him. Don't give in to them, because more than 40 of them are waiting to ambush him. They've taken an oath not to eat or drink until they've killed him. They're ready now, waiting for your consent to their request." The commander dismissed the young man and cautioned him, "Don't tell anyone that you reported this to me." Then he called 2 of the centurions and ordered them, get ready a detachment of 200 soldiers, 70 horsemen, 200 spearmen to go to Caesarea at 9 o'clock tonight. Provide mounts for Paul so that he may be taken safely to Governor Felix. You hear what happened there? Somehow Paul's nephew hears about the plot. We're not told how. We don't know how he got word of this, but somehow Paul's nephew hears about it. I thought about Ecclesiastes 10:20, and it actually happens in 2 Kings 6. Like, how are they hearing about this? Ecclesiastes 10:20 says, "Don't revile the king even if you're in your thoughts, or curse the rich in your bedroom, because a bird in the sky may carry your words, and a bird on a wing may report what you say." It's from this verse that we get that little phrase, "a little birdie told me." Have you heard that phrase? Somehow Paul's nephew hears about this plot and tells Paul about it. And he doesn't delay in finding Paul. He goes and tells him. And so Paul, what does he do? He says to one of the centurions, "Hey, get this young man and take him to the commander. He has something to tell him." He has something to share with them. And the commander is told by Paul's nephew about this plot. And so the plot is foiled. Some might say, well, you know what? That's just a happy coincidence. Good for Paul. Someone might say, well, that the fact that Paul's nephew heard about this plot at just the right time, that's just a coinky-dink. Have you heard that word? That kind of came to mind this week. That's just a coinky-dink. But look at verse 11. I didn't read it, but it is a bridge between what happens before and what goes on to happen. Look at verse 11 and what it says. According to verse 11, this is not a coincidence. This is an act of God's providence and goodness on Paul's behalf. Look at verse 11. The following night, the Lord stood near Paul and said, "Take courage. As you've testified about me in Jerusalem, you must also testify in Rome." See what's happening here? Since Paul is going to have to go to Rome, since the Lord wants to send him there, this plot is foiled. Since Paul has more work to do, this plan isn't going to succeed. Think about how zealous these 40 guys are. Oh, we're going to get Paul. We're going to kill him. It's not going to take us any time at all. We'll be eating and feasting tomorrow. They think they're going to kill Paul. But it doesn't come about. That's not how his life is going to end. And so just as what happens in Nehemiah, where they all return to the wall, they all go back to their work, they finish the job that was given to them, so God is going to make a way for Paul to get to Rome, to testify about the gospel of God's grace. And the thing is, in verse 11, Paul knows nothing about this plot, but the Lord does. In fact, it's happening at the same time, because by morning, they're to the religious leaders telling them about their plans. So at the same time that they're plotting, the Lord is protecting Paul. He doesn't know about it yet, about all that's happening. He's getting reassurances about the hardships he's in right now and what he's going to face. But what he doesn't know is what he's facing in terms of this death plot. But the Lord is giving him the assurance that when he does find out about that, he can give God thanks for his faithfulness to watch over him. The commander thankfully believes Paul's nephew, and perhaps because he'd seen the rage of the people, right? He had to rescue Paul twice. He saw what they tried to do to Paul, so he believes Paul's nephew. And notice what he does to ensure Paul's safety to Caesarea. Did you get the count there? 470 soldiers to accompany Paul. 470 soldiers to accompany Paul to Caesarea. It's actually the Lord's protection, isn't it? Paul Wilhowski says, Paul's nephew reports that the council would ask to see Paul the next morning. Therefore, the commander spirited Paul out of Jerusalem by 9 o'clock that night. You know what this also points out? It kind of vindicates Paul and his testimony concerning the resurrection of the dead. It vindicates him and also affirms his innocence, this vindication does, that this plot is foiled. Through many dangers, toils, and snares I've already come. 'Tis grace has brought me safe thus far. That's Paul's testimony, not just in this situation, but if you read 2 Corinthians chapter 6 and chapter 11 of that same book, there is an extensive list, if you go through it, an extensive list of all the hardships, persecutions, and trouble that he has been brought through. I would encourage you to read that on your own time. There is an extensive list. Paul's testimony is, God has brought me safely through thus far. He's brought me through. Grace has brought him through, and Paul will go to Rome to witness to the hope of the resurrection of the dead, just as the Lord wants him to. If the musicians would come, we're going to sing in response, all because of God's amazing grace. And hopefully you've been tabulating in your own heart and mind the ways that the Lord has brought you through. That you have begun to think about in your own heart and mind the dangers, toils, and snares that the Lord has brought you through. And as we sing this morning, it can be in thanksgiving for all that he's done to help you. Or perhaps for some of you this morning, this is kind of a word in season. You need God to bring you through some current dangers, toils, and snares. And you don't see the way out, you don't see the way through, you don't see what God is going to do, but you need him to come and help you. And this song could be a way of asking God or turning it into a prayer. Lord, bring me through. Bring me safely through. Help me in this. David Gusick says, there was more for Paul to do, so you must also bear witness at Rome was Paul's next assignment. The greatest words a faithful child of God can hear is, there's more for you to do. It can be said of every child, to every child of God, there's more for you to do. More people to bring to Christ, more ways to glorify him, more ways to pray for people, more humble ways to serve his people, more hungry to feed, more naked to clothe, more weary saints for you to encourage. And as we sing, for some of you, it might be, Lord, what is it that you have for me in this season of my life? You may not be able to do everything that you used to be able to do or want to do, but the Lord has something more for you in this season of your life. And this song could be a way of saying, Lord, what is that? There's more fruitful labor in the Lord for you to give yourself to. What might that be? And as we sing, we can sing with the assurance that whatever he's going to ask us to do, he's going to give us the grace we need to accomplish that. I would invite us to sing and stand and sing, all because of God's amazing grace.